Jesus Christ, the bearer of the water of life. A Christian reflection on the New Age. Sponsored by the Pontifical Council for Culture and the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. Forward. The present study is concerned with the complex phenomenon of New Age, which is influencing many aspects of contemporary culture. The study is a provisional report. It is the fruit of the common reflection of the Working Group on New Religious Movements, composed of staff members of different dicasteries of the Holy See, the Pontifical Councils for Culture and for Interreligious Dialogue, which are the principal redactors for this project, the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, and the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. These reflections are offered primarily to those engaged in pastoral work, so that they might be able to explain how the New Age movement differs from the Christian faith. This study invites readers to take account of the way that the New Age religiosity addresses the spiritual hunger of contemporary men and women. It should be recognized that the attraction that the New Age religiosity has for some Christians may be due in part to the lack of serious attention in their own communities for themes which are actually part of the Catholic synthesis, such as the importance of man's spiritual dimension and its integration with the whole of life, the search for life's meaning, the link between human beings and the rest of creation, the desire for personal and social transformation, and the rejection of a rationalistic and materialistic view of humanity. The present publication calls the attention to the need to know and understand New Age as a cultural current, as well as the need for Catholics to have an understanding of authentic Catholic doctrine and spirituality in order to properly assess New Age themes. The first two chapters present New Age as a multifaceted cultural tendency, proposing an analysis of the basic foundations of the thought conveyed in this context. From Chapter 3 onwards, some indications are offered for an investigation of New Age in comparison with the Christian message. Some suggestions of a pastoral nature are also made. Those who wish to go deeper into the study of New Age will find useful references in the appendices. It is hoped that this work will in fact provide a stimulus for further studies adapted to different cultural contexts. Its purpose is also to encourage discernment by those who are looking for sound reference points for a life of greater fullness. It is indeed our conviction that through many of our contemporaries who are searching, we can discover a true thirst for God. As Pope John Paul II said to a group of bishops from the United States, pastors must honestly ask whether they have paid sufficient attention to the thirst of the human heart for the true living water, which is only Christ our Redeemer can give. Like him, we want to rely on the perennial freshness of the gospel message and its capacity to transform and renew those who accept it. 1. What sort of reflection? The following reflections are meant as a guide for Catholics involved in preaching the gospel and teaching the faith at any level within the Church. This document does not aim at providing a set of complete answers to the many questions raised by the New Age or other contemporary signs of the perennial human search for happiness, meaning, and salvation. It is an invitation to understand the New Age and to engage in a genuine dialogue with those who are influenced by New Age thought. The document guides those involved in pastoral work in their understanding and response to New Age spirituality, both illustrating the points where the spirituality contrasts with the Catholic faith and refuting the positions espoused by New Age thinkers in opposition to Christian faith. What is indeed required of Christians is, first and foremost, a solid grounding in their faith. On this sound base, they can build a life which responds positively to the invitation of the first letter of St. Peter. Always have your answer ready for people who ask you the reason for the hope that you all have, but give it with courtesy and respect and a clear conscience. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. 1.1. Why now? The beginning of the third millennium comes not only 2,000 years after the birth of Christ, but also at a time when astrologers believe that the age of Pisces, known to them as the Christian age, is drawing to a close. These reflections are about the New Age, which takes its name from an eminent astrological age of Aquarius. The New Age is one of the many explanations of the significance of this moment in history, which are bombarding contemporary, particularly Western, culture. And it is hard to see clearly what is and what is not consistent with the Christian message. So this seems to be the right moment to offer a Christian assessment of New Age thinking and of the New Age movement as a whole. It has been said, quite correctly, that many people hover between certainty and uncertainty these days, particularly in questions relating to their identity. Some say that the Christian religion is patriarchal and authoritarian, that political institutions are unable to improve the world, and that formal, allopathic medicine simply fails to heal people effectively. The fact that what were once central elements in a society are now perceived as untrustworthy or lacking in genuine authority has created a climate where people look inwards, into themselves, for meaning and strength. There is also a search for alternative institutions, which people hope will respond to their deepest needs. The unstructured or chaotic life of alternative communities of the 1970s has given way to a search for discipline and structures, which are clearly key elements in the immensely popular mystical movements. New Age is attractive mainly because so much of what it offers meets hungers often left satisfied by the established institutions. While much of the New Age is a reaction to contemporary culture, there are many ways in which it is that culture's child. The Renaissance and the Reformation have shaped the modern Western individual, who is not weighed down by external burdens like merely extrinsic authority and tradition. People feel the need to belong to institutions less and less, and yet loneliness is very much a scourge of modern life, and are not inclined to rank official judgments above their own. With this cult of humanity, religion is internalized in a way which prepares the ground for a celebration of the sacredness of the self. This is why the New Age shares many of the values espoused by enterprise culture and the prosperity gospel, of which more will be said later, section 2.4, and also by the consumer of culture, whose influence is clear from the rapidly growing numbers of people who claim that it is possible to blend Christianity and New Age by taking what strikes them as the best of both. It is worth remembering that deviations within Christianity have also gone beyond traditional theism in accepting a unilateral turn to self, and this would encourage such a blending of approaches. The important thing to note is that God is reduced in certain New Age practices so as furthering the advancement of the individual. New Age appeals to people imbued with the values of modern culture: freedom, authenticity, self-reliance, and the like are all held to be sacred. It appeals to those who have problems with patriarchy. It does not demand any more faith or belief than going to the cinema, and yet it claims to satisfy people's spiritual appetites. But here is a central question. Just what is meant by spirituality in a New Age context? The answer is the key to unlocking some of the differences between Christian tradition and much of what can be called New Age. Some versions of New Age harness the powers of nature and seek to communicate with another world to discover the fate of individuals, to help individuals tune in to the right frequency to make most of themselves and their circumstances. In most cases, it is completely fatalistic. Christianity, on the one hand, is an invitation to look outward and beyond, to the new advent of the God who calls us to live the dialogue of love. 1.2. Communications. The technological revolution in communications over the last few years has brought about a completely new situation. The ease and speed with which people can now communicate is one of the reasons why the New Age has come to the attention of people of all ages and backgrounds, and many who follow Christ are not sure what it is all about. The Internet, in particular, has become enormously influential, especially with younger people, who find it a congenial and fascinating way of acquiring information. But it is a volatile vehicle of misinformation on so many aspects of religion. Not all that is labeled Christian or Catholic can be trusted to reflect the teachings of the Catholic Church. And at the same time, there is a remarkable expansion of New Age sources ranging from the serious to the ridiculous. People need, and have a right to, reliable information on the differences between Christianity and the New Age. 1.3. Cultural background. When one examines many New Age traditions, it soon becomes clear that there is, in fact, little in the New Age that is new. The name seems to have gained currency through Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry at the time of the French and American Revolutions, but the reality it denotes is a contemporary variant of Western esotericism. This dates back to Gnostic groups, which grew up in the early days of Christianity, and gained momentum at the time of the Reformation in Europe. It has grown in parallel with scientific worldviews and acquired a rational justification through the 18th and 19th centuries. It has involved a progressive rejection of a personal God and the focus on other entities which would often figure as intermediaries between God and humanity in traditional Christianity, with more or less original adaptations of those or additional ones. A powerful trend in modern Western culture which has given space to New Age ideas is the general acceptance of Darwinist evolutionary theory. This, alongside a focus on hidden spiritual powers or forces in nature, has been the backbone of much of what is now recognized as New Age theory. Basically, New Age has found a remarkable level of acceptance because the worldview on which it is based was already widely accepted. The ground was well prepared by the growth and spread of relativism, along with an antipathy or indifference towards the Christian faith. Furthermore, there's been a lively discussion about whether and in what sense New Age can be described as a postmodern phenomenon. The existence and fervor of New Age thinking and practice bear witness to the unquenchable longing of the human spirit for transcendence and religious meaning, which is not only a contemporary cultural phenomenon, but was evident in the ancient world, both Christian and pagan. 1.4 The New Age and Catholic Faith. Even if it can be admitted that New Age religiosity in some way responds to the legitimate spiritual longing of human nature, it must be acknowledged that its attempts to do so run counter to Christian revelation. In Western culture in particular, the appeal of alternative approaches to spirituality is very strong. On the one hand, new forms of psychological affirmation of the individual have become very popular among Catholics, even in retreat houses, seminaries, and institutes of formation for religious. At the same time, there is an increasing nostalgia and curiosity for the wisdom and ritual of long ago, which is one of the reasons for the remarkable growth in popularity of esotericism and Gnosticism. Many people are particularly attracted to what is known, correctly or otherwise, as Celtic spirituality, or the religions of the ancient peoples. Books and courses on spirituality and ancient or Eastern religions are a booming business, and they are frequently labeled New Age for commercial purposes. But the links with those religions are not always clear. In fact, they are often denied. An adequate Christian discernment of New Age thought and practice cannot fail to recognize that, like the 2nd or 3rd century Gnosticism, it represents something of a compendium of positions that the Church has identified as heterodox. John Paul II warns with regard to the return of ancient Gnostic ideas under the guise of the so-called New Age. We cannot delude ourselves that this will lead towards a renewal of religion. It is only a new way of practicing Gnosticism, an attitude of the spirit that, in the name of a profound knowledge of God, results in distorting his word and replacing it with purely human words. Gnosticism never completely abandoned the realm of Christianity. Instead, it has always existed side by side with Christianity, sometimes taking the shape of a philosophical movement, but more often assuming the characteristics of a religion or a para-religion in distinct, if not declared, conflict with all that is essentially Christian. An example of this can be seen in the Enneagram, a nine-type tool for character analysis, which when used as a means of spiritual growth introduces an ambiguity in the doctrine and life of the Christian faith. 1.5. A positive challenge. The appeal of New Age religiosity cannot be underestimated. When the understanding of the content of Christian faith is weak, some mistakenly hold that the Christian religion does not inspire a profound spirituality, and so they seek elsewhere. As a matter of fact, some say the New Age is already passing us by, and refer to the next age. They speak of a crisis that began to manifest itself in the United States of America in the early 1990s, but admit that, especially among English-speaking world, such a crisis may come later. But bookshops and radio stations and a plethora of self-help groups in so many Western towns and cities all seem to tell a different story. It seems that, at least for the moment, the New Age is still very much alive and part of the current cultural scene. The success of New Age offers the Church a challenge. People feel the Christian religion no longer offers them, or perhaps never gave them, something they really need. The search which often leads people to the New Age is a genuine yearning for a deeper spirituality, for something that will touch their hearts, and for a way of making sense of a confusing and often alienating world. There is a positive tone in New Age criticisms of the materialism of daily life, of philosophy, and even of medicine and psychiatry. Reductionism, which refuses to take into consideration religious and supernatural experiences, the industrial culture of unrestrained individualism, which teaches egoism and pays no attention to other people, the future, or the environment. Any problems that are with the New Age are to be found in what it proposes as alternative answers to life's questions. If the Church is not to be accused of being deaf to people's longings, her members need to do two things: to root themselves even more firmly in the fundamentals of their faith, and to understand the often silent cry in people's hearts, which leads them elsewhere, if they are not satisfied by the Church. There is also a call in all of this to come closer to Jesus Christ, and to be ready to follow him, since he is the real way to happiness, the truth about God and the fullness of life for every man and woman who prepared to respond to his love. Two, New Age spirituality, an overview. Many Christians in many Western societies, and increasingly also in other parts of the world, frequently come into contact with different aspects of the phenomena known as New Age. Many of them feel the need to understand how they can best approach something which is at once so alluring, complex, elusive, and at times disturbing. These reflections are an attempt to help Christians do two things. 1. To identify elements of the developing New Age tradition. 2. To indicate those elements which are inconsistent with the Christian revelation. This is a pastoral response to a current challenge, which does not even attempt to provide an exhaustive list of New Age phenomena, since that would result in a very bulky tome, and such information is readily available elsewhere. It is essential to try to understand New Age correctly in order to evaluate it fairly and avoid creating a caricature. It would be unwise and untrue to say that everything connected with the New Age movement is good, or that everything about it is bad. Nevertheless, given the underlying vision of New Age religiosity, it is on the whole difficult to reconcile it with Christian doctrine and spirituality. New Age is not a movement in the sense normally intended in the term new religious movement, and it is not what is normally meant by the term cult and sect. Because it is spread across cultures in phenomena as varied as music, films, seminars, workshops, retreats, therapies, and many more activities and events. It is much more diffuse and informal, though some religious or para-religious groups consciously incorporate New Age elements, and it has been suggested that New Age has been a source of ideas for various religious or para-religious sects. The New Age is not a single uniform movement, but rather a loose network of practitioners whose approach is to think globally but act locally. People who are part of the network do not necessarily know each other and rarely, if ever, meet. In an attempt to avoid the confusion which can arise from using the term movement, some refer to New Age as a milieu or an audience cult. However, it has also been pointed out that it is a very coherent current of thought, a deliberate challenge to modern culture. It is a synchronistic structure incorporating many diverse elements, allowing people to share interests or connections to the very different degrees and on varying levels of commitment. Many trends, practices, and attitudes, which are in some way part of the New Age, are, indeed, part of a broad and readily identifiable reaction to mainstream culture. So the word movement is not entirely out of place. It can be applied to New Age in the same sense as it is to other broad social movements, like the civil rights movement or the peace movement. Like them, it includes a bewildering array of people linked to the movement's main aims, but also very diverse in the way they are involved and in their understanding of particular issues. The expression New Age religion is more controversial, so it seems best to avoid it. Although New Age is often a response to people's religious questions and needs, and its appeal is to people who are trying to discover or rediscover a spiritual dimension in their life. Avoidance of the term New Age religion is not meant in any way to question the genuine character of people's search for meaning and sense in life. It respects the fact that many within the New Age movement themselves distinguish carefully between religion and spirituality. Many have rejected organized religion because in their judgment it has failed to answer their needs, and for precisely this reason they have looked elsewhere to find spirituality. Furthermore, at the heart of New Age is the belief that the time for particular religions is over. So, to refer to it as a religion would run counter to its own self-understanding. However, it is quite accurate to place New Age in a broader context of esoteric religiousness, whose appeal continues to grow. There is a problem built into the current text. It is an attempt to understand and evaluate something which is basically an exaltation of the richness of human experience. It is bound to draw the criticism that it can never do justice to a cultural movement whose essence is precisely to break out of what are seen as the constricting limits of rational discourse. But it is meant as an invitation to Christians to take New Age seriously, and as such asks its readers to enter into a critical dialogue with people approaching the same world from very different perspectives. The pastoral effectiveness of the Church in the third millennium depends to a great extent on the preparation of effective communicators of the gospel message. What follows is a response to the difficulties expressed by many in dealing with the very complex and elusive phenomenon known as New Age. It is an attempt to understand what New Age is and to recognize the questions to which it claims to offer answers and solutions. There are some excellent books and other resources which survey the whole phenomena, or to particular aspects in detail, and reference will be made to some of these in the appendix. However, they do not always undertake the necessary discernment in the light of Christian faith. The purpose of this contribution is to help Catholics find a key to understanding the basic principles behind New Age thinking, so that they can then make a Christian evaluation of the elements of New Age they encounter. It is worth saying that many people dislike the term New Age, and some suggest that alternative spirituality would be more correct and less limiting. It is also true that many of the phenomena mentioned in this document will probably not bear any particular label, but it is presumed, for the sake of brevity, that readers will recognize a phenomena or a set of phenomena that can justifiably at least be linked with the general cultural movement known as New Age. Two point one. What is new about the New Age? For many people, the term New Age clearly refers to a momentous turning point in history. According to astrologers, we live in the age of Pisces, which has been dominated by Christianity. But the current age of Pisces is due to replace by the new age of Aquarius early in the third millennium. The age of Aquarius has such a high profile in the New Age movement, largely because of the influence of theosophy, spiritualism, and anthroposophy, and their esoteric antecedents. People who stress the imminent change in the world are often expressing a wish for such a change, not so much in the world itself as in our culture, in the way we relate to the world. This is particularly clear in those who stress the idea of a new paradigm for living. It is an attractive approach since, in some of its expressions, people do not watch passively, but have an active role in changing culture and bringing about a new spiritual awareness. In other expressions, more power is ascribed to the inevitable progression of natural cycles. In any case, the age of Aquarius is a vision, not a theory. But New Age is a broad tradition which incorporates many ideas which have no explicit link with the change from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. There are moderate, but often generalized, visions of a future where there will be a planetary spirituality alongside separate religions, similar planetary political institutions to complement the more local ones, global economic entities which are more participatory and democratic, greater emphasis on communication and education, a mixed approach to health combining a professional medicine and self-healing, a more androgynous self-understanding, and ways of integrating science, mysticism, technology, and ecology. Again, this is evidence of a deep desire for a fulfilling and healthy existence for the human race and for the planet. Some of the traditions which flow into the New Age are ancient Egyptian occult practices, Kabbalism, early Christian Gnosticism, Sufism, the lore of the Druids, Celtic Christianity, medieval alchemy, Renaissance Hermeticism, Zen Buddhism, yoga, and so on. Here is what is new about the New Age. It is a syncretism of esoteric and secular elements. They link into a widely held perception that the time is ripe for a fundamental change in individuals, in society, and in the world. There are various expressions of the need for a shift, from Newtonian mechanistic physics to quantum physics, from modernity's exaltation of reason to an appreciation of feeling, emotion, and experience, often described as a switch from left brain rational thinking to right brain intuitive thinking. From a dominance of masculinity and patriarchy to a celebration of femininity of individuals and in society. In these contexts, the term paradigm shift is often used. In some cases, it is clearly supposed that this shift is not simply desirable, but inevitable. The rejection of modernity underlying this desire for change is not new, but can be described as a modern revival of pagan religions with a mixture of influences from both Eastern religions and from modern psychology, philosophy, science, and the counterculture that developed in the 50s and 60s. New Age is a witness to nothing less than a cultural revolution, a complex reaction to the dominant ideas and values in Western culture, and yet its idealistic criticism is itself, ironically, typical of the culture it criticizes. A word needs to be said on the notion of paradigm shift. It was made popular by Thomas Kuhn, an American historian of science, who saw a paradigm as the entire constellation of beliefs, values, techniques, and so on shared by members of a given community. When there is a shift from one paradigm to another, it is a question of wholesale transformation of perspective rather than one of gradual development. It really is a revolution, and Kuhn emphasized that competing paradigms are incommensurable and cannot coexist. So the idea that a paradigm shift in the area of religion and spirituality is simply a new way of stating traditional beliefs misses the point. What is actually going on is a radical change in worldview, which puts into question not only the content, but also the fundamental interpretation of the former vision. Perhaps the clearest example of this, in terms of the relationship between the New Age and Christianity, is the total recasting of the life and significance of Jesus Christ. It is impossible to reconcile these two visions. Science and technology have clearly failed to deliver all they once seemed to promise. So in their search for meaning and liberation, people have turned to the spiritual realm. New Age, as we now know it, came from a search for something more humane and beautiful than the oppressive, alienating experience of life in Western society. Its early exponents were prepared to look far afield in their search, so it has become a very eclectic approach. It may well be one of the signs of a return to religion, but it is most certainly not a return to orthodox Christian doctrines and creeds. The first symbols of this movement to penetrate Western culture were the remarkable festival at Woodstock in New York State in 1969 and the musical Hair, which set forth the main themes of New Age in the emblematic song Aquarius. But these were merely the tip of an iceberg whose dimensions have become clearer only relatively recently. The idealism of the 60s and 70s still survives in some quarters, but now it is no longer predominantly adolescents who are involved. Links with left-wing political ideology has faded, and psychedelic drugs are by no means as prominent as they once were. So much has happened since then that all this no longer seems revolutionary. Spiritual and mystical tendencies formerly restricted to the counterculture are now an established part of mainstream culture, affecting such diverse facets of life as medicine, science, art, and religion. Western culture is now imbued with a more general political and ecological awareness, and this whole cultural shift has had an enormous impact on people's lifestyles. It is suggested by some that the New Age movement is precisely this major change to what is reckoned to be a significantly better way of life. Chapter 2, Part 2. What does the New Age claim to offer? Chapter 2, Part 2, Point 1. Enchantment. There must be an angel. One of the most common elements in New Age spirituality is a fascination with extraordinary manifestations, and in particular with paranormal entities. People recognized as mediums claim that their personality is taken over by another entity during trances in a New Age phenomena known as channeling, during which the medium may lose control over his or her body and faculties. Some people who have witnessed these events would willingly acknowledge that the manifestations are indeed spiritual, but are not from God, despite the language of love and light, which is almost always used. It is probably more correct to refer to this as a contemporary form of spiritualism, rather than spirituality in a strict sense. Other friends and counselors from the spirit world are angels, which have become the center of a new industry of books and paintings. Those who refer to angels in the New Age do so in an unsystematic way. In fact, distinctions in the area are sometimes described as unhelpful if they are too precise, because there are many levels of guides, entities, energies, and beings in every octave of the universe. They are there to pick and choose from in relation to your own attraction-repulsion mechanisms. These spiritual entities are often invoked non-religiously to help in relaxation aimed at better decision-making, and control of one's life and career. Fusion with some spirits who teach through particular people is another New Age experience claimed by people who refer to themselves as mystics. Some nature spirits are described as powerful energies existing in the natural world and also on the inner planes, that is, those which are accessible by the use of rituals, drugs, and other techniques for reaching altered states of consciousness. It is clear that, in theory at least, the New Age often recognizes no spiritual authority higher than personal inner experience. Chapter 2, Part 2, 2. Understanding and Harmony, Good Vibrations. Phenomena as diverse as the Findhorn Garden and Feng Shui represent a variety of ways which illustrate the importance of being in tune with nature or the cosmos. In New Age, there is no distinction between good and evil. Human actions are the fruit of either illumination or ignorance. Hence, we cannot condemn anyone, and nobody needs forgiveness. Believing in the existence of evil can create only negativity and fear. The answer to negativity is love. But what is not the sort which has to be translated into deeds? It is more a question of attitudes of mind. Love is energy, a high-frequency vibration, and the secret to happiness and health and to success is being able to tune in to find one's place in the great chain of being. New Age teachers and therapies claim to offer the key to finding the correspondences between all the elements of the universe, so that people may modulate the tone of their lives and be in absolute harmony with each other and with everything around them, although there are different theoretical backgrounds. Chapter 2, Part 2, Point 3. Health, Golden Living. Formal, allopathic medicine today tends to limit itself to curing particular isolated ailments and fails to look at the broader picture of a person's health. This has given rise to a fair amount of understandable dissatisfaction. Alternative therapies have gained enormously in popularity because they claim to look at the whole person and are about healing rather than curing. Holistic health, as it is known, concentrates on the important role that the mind plays in physical healing. The connection between the spiritual and the physical aspects of the person is said to be in the immune system or the Indian chakra system. In New Age perspective, illness and suffering come from working against nature. When one is in tune with nature, one can expect a much healthier life and even material prosperity. For some New Age healers, there should actually be no need for us to die. Developing our human potential will put us in touch with our inner divinity and with those parts of ourselves which have been alienated and suppressed. This is revealed above all in altered states of consciousness, which are induced either by drugs or by various mind-expanding techniques, particularly in the context of transpersonal psychology. The shaman is often seen as the specialist of altered states of consciousness and one who is able to mediate between the transpersonal realms of spirit and gods and the world of humans. There is a remarkable variety of approaches for promoting holistic health, some derived from ancient cultural traditions, whether religious or esoteric, Others connected with the psychological theories developed in Esalen during the years 1960 to 1970. Advertising connected with New Age covers a wide range of practices as acupuncture, biofeedback, chiropractic, kinesiology, homeopathy, iridology, massage, and various kinds of body work such as origami, Feldenkrais, reflexology, Rolfing, polarity massage, therapeutic touch, etc. Meditation and visualization, nutritional therapy, psychic healing, various kinds of herbal medicine, healing by crystals, metals, music or colors, reincarnation therapies, and, finally, 12-step programs and self-help groups. The source of healing is said to be within ourselves, something we reach when we are in touch with our inner energy and cosmic energy. Inasmuch as health includes a prolongation of life, New Age offers an Eastern formula in Western terms. Originally, reincarnation was part of the Hindu cyclical thought based on the Atman, or divine kernel of personality, later concept of Jiva, which moved from body to body in a cycle of suffering, samsara, determined by the law of karma, linked to behavior in past lives. Hope lies in the possibility of being born into a better state, or ultimately in liberation from the need to be reborn. What is different in most Buddhist traditions is that what wanders from body to body is not a soul, but a continuum of consciousness. Present life is embedded in a potentially endless cosmic process, which includes even the gods. In the West, since the time of Lessing, reincarnation has been understood far more optimistically as a process of learning and progressive individual fulfillment. Spiritualism, theosophy, anthroposophy, and New Age all seek reincarnation as participation in cosmic evolution. This post-Christian approach to eschatology is said to have answers the unresolved questions of theodicy and dispenses with the notion of hell. When the soul is separated from the bodies, individuals can look back on their whole life up to that point. And when the soul is united to its new body, there is a preview of its coming phase of life. People have access to their former lives through dreams and meditation techniques. Chapter 2, Part 2.4. Wholeness, a Magical Mystery Tour.